the people that are having a hard time getting in. Okay, so let's just do a very, very quick review of what we spoke about last week, and then we will start conversation for this week. So last week, the Ramchal, by Moshe Chaim Luzzatto, author of our phenomenal work that we're studying called Path of the Just, he gave us a very, very helpful definition of the word good. Right? You know, everybody wants to be good. People are driven to be good. It's an interesting thing that even people that we consider evil are driven to be good. It's just they have a very different definition of what good is than other people seem to have, right? But everybody wants to be good. And the question is, what is good? How do we define good? How can we, pinpoint what good is? So the Ramchal says, quoting King David, relying on the Psalms of King David, he gives us a very, very simple definition of what good is. And that is what he refers to as kirvas or kirvat Elokim, closeness to God. Kirvat Elokim, that's what David said. King David wrote in Psalms. Closeness to God, that is the definition of good, which is a very helpful thing to know, because then the Ramchal explains basically that life then becomes a process of deciding and analyzing situations, challenges, choices with the metrics of, is this going to bring me closer to my Creator? If it is, then that is good. And that is something that I should pursue with every fiber of my essence. And if the answer is no, that it's not going to lead me closer to Hashem, that it's going to somehow lead me further away from Hashem, then we call that bad, not good. And we should run away from that as fast as our legs will carry us. And that was the basic takeaway, I would say, from last week's discussion. And now he's going to apply it a little bit more. We are on page 26, actually on the very bottom of 25. If you look on page 25, you'll see there's Hebrew text on the top, and then there's like a main body of text below that, and then below that there are footnotes, and below that there are notes on the notes. Okay, so we're in the main body of text over there on the bottom, and we just finished off where he quotes from King David, who says that there's one thing that I seek, and that is to dwell in the house of Hashem all the days of my life, meaning to pursue that closeness to Hashem. And then he says the following words. This is where I want to start today. Ki rak ze hu hatov, v'chol zulat ze sheyachshavu b'nei ha'adam l'tov eino ela hevel v'shav niseh. Which means, for only this being closeness to God, attachment to Him, is the true good. While anything else that people consider to be good, in quotes, is nothing but futility and deceptive nothingness. Hey, Augie. Okay. Deceptive and nothingness. That's it. Futility and deceptive nothingness. If it's not tov, if it's not something that's going to lead to attachment to Him, even though people consider it to be good, it's nothing but futility and deceptive nothingness. So let's understand what he's saying over here. So this concept of attachment to God, spiritual connection, being close to my Creator, having a relationship with the infinite source of existence, that is the only thing that is considered to be good from a Jewish point of view. It's not that there are a lot of good things, and this is one of the many good things. He says he uses the word in Hebrew, the word rak, You know what the word rock means in Hebrew? Rock.
Only.
Only. Only. It's an exclusive clause. It means only this is good, nothing else. If whatever you're contemplating doing or saying or pursuing does not lead to kirvas Elokim, greater closeness to God, greater connection, greater attachment, then it is not good. If it doesn't lead to kirvas Elokim, it's not good, no matter how good it feels, no matter how much fun it might be, no matter how good it tastes. If it doesn't lead to closeness to Hashem, it's not good. Okay, that's what he's saying. Now, just to make sure, we've spoken about this before, but just to make sure that we understand, this is not to say that only religious or spiritual experiences or activities are good. It's not what he's saying. He's not saying the only thing that's good in the world are religious activities that bring you closer to Hashem. Eating at a nice restaurant, for example, can also be good. It can also lead to kirvas Elokim, deepened connection to my Creator. How? Well, if it's a restaurant, kosher restaurant, let's say, and it's a restaurant and I'm going with friends, good company, and we're having good, positive, supportive conversation, and it's a nice break, it's a nice treat, and it's a nice break from the hard work of my daily routine, right? So then that can absolutely be something that's bringing me closer to my Creator. It doesn't mean, he's not saying over here that only religious spiritual activities can be good. All of our activities can be good. Remember our quote from King David last week where he said, I just read it in the beginning of this talk, where he said, there's only one thing that I want. I want to sit in the house of Hashem all the days of my life. And you remember the question that we asked about that last week? Excuse me, David, how's that supposed to happen? How are you supposed to sit in the synagogue or in the sanctuary all the days of your life when you've got a country to run? You've got diplomacy to handle. You've got foreign affairs to deal with. You've got roads to build. You've got poor people to feed. You've got Philistines to defend yourself against. You have land to conquer. How are you supposed to sit in the sanctuary of God all the days of your life? And we said that that's not what he was asking for. He wasn't asking to physically sit in the sanctuary of God all the days of his life. He was saying that whatever he's doing, whether he's involved in state affairs or whether he's involved in domestic or foreign policy, whatever he's doing, let it be done in a way where it's leading to closeness, greater closeness to Hashem. So that's the same thing over here, that anything can be good. Our mundane daily activities, all the things that we do, going to work, spending time with our family, being involved in communal activities, our vacations, everything that we do can be good if it's set up in such a way, and if it's created in such a way where it's going to lead to greater closeness to Hashem. So that's something to think about when you're spending time with your family, when you're going on vacation, when you're going to work. How can you structure your mundane, so to speak, activities so that they're actually not mundane at all, but they're leading to a greater closeness to Hashem? So that's the important thing to remember. And to the degree that those activities, our mundane, our pedestrian, our regular activities, lead us away from closeness to God, whether it's our work or our social life or our communal activities or our vacations or our family life, if they're leading us further away from our connection to our Creator, then we need to fix them. We need to think about how we can rearrange them and restructure them in such a way that they'll be leading us towards greater closeness. I want to share with you something that that my teacher was talking about a lot in my first operation in Judaism. Where is he? There he is. There he is. Rabbi Noah Weinberg. He's not sitting in this room. He's always sitting in the room. That's the way 11 years ago. But he taught so many incredible pieces of wisdom that have stuck with me for my whole life. And one of the things that he used to say, I'm actually going to share two things that he taught us. One of them is that Life is made up of real pleasure and counterfeit pleasure. Okay, real
Can you repeat
pleasure.
that? It wasn't clear.
Yes, life is made up of real pleasures and counterfeit pleasures. Okay, real pleasures are the ones that lead you ultimately closer to Hashem, that deepen your connection and your spirituality and deepen your attachment to the Creator. And counterfeit pleasures are, we're going to talk about that. Let's get clear what counterfeit pleasures are. Counterfeit pleasures, they look like real pleasures. They feel like real pleasures. They taste like real pleasures, but they are not real pleasures at all. They masquerade as real pleasure, but they aren't. How can you tell the difference? How do you know when something's a real pleasure or a counterfeit pleasure? Well, one of the ways is, how do you feel afterward? If afterward you feel unfulfilled, unsatisfied, still hungry, so to speak, then that was a counterfeit pleasure. The counterfeit pleasures leave you feeling empty afterwards. Okay, why are they there? Why is the world filled with counterfeit pleasures? Because the counterfeit pleasures, after all, they distract us, right? Why did God put so many counterfeit pleasures into the world if they're going to just distract us from the real pleasures, which are the pleasures that bring us closer to Hashem? The answer to that is obviously something that the Ramchal speaks about a lot here and also in one of his other classic works, The Way of God, and that is free choice. Free choice. Free choice means that there will always be the option available to me at any moment, at any turn in my life, to gravitate towards the real pleasures, the ones that are aligned with the higher me, the higher self, or the lower pleasures, the ones that are aligned with the lower part of me, the lower self. The higher pleasures, the real pleasures being those ones that bring me closer to Hashem. And the lower pleasures, the counterfeit pleasures, being the ones that pull me away from Hashem. And now I have choice. And now my life matters. And now the things that I do take on relevance because they're the result of me having chosen them or having chosen not to do them. Okay, so the counterfeit pleasures are there to create free will. And in order for them to do that, in order for them to actually create free will, by definition, they have to always have more to offer, in a sense, on the than the real pleasures do, in the level of immediate physical gratification. Let me explain. You've heard me give this example before. Okay, it's lunchtime. I need to eat something, and I'm trying to decide, what do I want to do? Do I want to go across the street and get a couple slices of really good greasy pizza and some fries and a Coke maybe? Or do I want to go to the Whole Foods and get some kale and tofu and make myself some kind of healthy salad? Okay, that's a choice. I have to make a decision. What's the choice based on? What are my goals? What are my goals? If my goal is to eat something right now that tastes really good, then obviously I'm going to eat the pizza and the fries. I wouldn't eat the kale and the tofu if my purpose of eating was that it should taste good. Okay, but if my purpose of eating something right now is to be healthy, to have gas in the tank, to be energized, then I'm going to eat the tofu and kale because it's healthy and it's going to give me nutrients and energy, as opposed to the pizza and the fries, which is going to make me tired and sluggish a few minutes later. Okay, so I have a real choice. But what if, imagine for a second, if it happened to be that the pizza and fries were also happened to be the healthier choice, the more nutritious choice, the one that's going to give me energy and life and health. So in that case, if that were the case, would anybody at that point in their right mind choose the kale and the tofu? It tastes terrible and it's less healthy. So obviously, if the pleasures that taste better are also better for me, then I have no choice. I have no free will. The only reason why I have free will is because I have the food that's going to taste good and I have the food that's going to be healthy, and they're two different things and I have to choose. But if they were one and the same, I'd have no choice. So the same thing is true in life, in real life. Okay, real pleasures, as defined by the Ramchal and King David HaMelech in Psalms, as being those things which bring me closer to Hashem, more attached to my Creator. Those are real pleasures. Okay, they're by definition going to be hard and involve sacrifice, commitment, consistency, hard work, all those things that we all struggle with. Okay, learning Torah daily, keeping kosher, learning Hebrew, whatever it is that you want, that's a real pleasure, that's going to lift you up and bring you to a higher place. If it's really, truly a real pleasure, if by definition, it's going to be hard. By definition, it's going to involve commitment, sacrifice, and consistency. The counterfeit pleasures, on the other hand, the ones that lead me away from that attachment to God, have to be and will be very geschmack, a great Yiddish word. Geschmack means delicious. They're going to taste really good. They're going to be easy, easily accessible, easily accessed, fun. They're going to require no commitment and no sacrifice. You're going to feel really good. Okay? It's like on a Sunday morning, you can sit and watch Netflix, or you can go to a Torah class. You know, one is real pleasure, one's counterfeit pleasure. You can go to eat at Lumalnati's, or you can go to eat at Tel Aviv Pizza, right? One of them tastes delicious. It's really, really good, and it's fun. And one of them, maybe not as much. Okay, Tel Aviv's pizza is, not Lumalnati's from what I understand. But that's a choice that you have to make. Now I have a choice. Now I have to decide. I have to define my values. I have to decide who I am and what I'm aligning myself with. And if my goal in life is real pleasure and kirvas Elokim, attachment and closeness to God, then I'm going to make a choice one way. And if my goal in life is to have an easy, comfortable, fun life, then I'm going to choose another way. So counterfeit pleasures are there at every turn, at every moment, to make sure and to maintain the option, the reality of free will at all times. So let's reread those words one more time, and you'll see that this is what the Ramchal is telling us. He says, for only this, rakzeh, only this being attachment to God, okay, is the true good. And anything else that people consider to be good, those are the counterfeit pleasures. They're nothing but futility and deceptive nothingness. Deception. They're there to deceive us. They're there to provide us with an option to move away from what's really good. And that is the free will reality. Those are the real pleasures and the counterfeit pleasures. And ultimately, this is, if you think about it, this is just a body-soul issue. That's what this really boils down to. My soul, my neshama, yearns for meaning, virtue, growth, connection. My body, forget about growth, meaning. My body wants an easy ride. My body wants no pain. My body wants fun. Okay, think of it a good example of that when it comes to the realm of sexuality. Sexuality is probably the best, area to highlight this. You can have an intimate connection with your spouse that builds closeness and love and connection and commitment. That's real pleasure. That's real pleasure because that also brings you closer to Hashem and closer to the fulfillment of your purpose and your essence in this world. That's on one hand. That's real pleasure. What's the counterfeit pleasure? To use an extreme example, pornography. Pornography is the counterfeit pleasure. And how do you know? Because it leaves the person feeling empty and depressed afterwards. Okay, that's how Rav Noach used to explain it. He used to give that example. And he used to say, this was a famous question that he used to ask everybody. If you hung out with Rabbi Noach Weinberg for one day, you were definitely asked the following question. And if you hung out with me at all, you've probably been asked the following question at all. Here's the question. What's the opposite of pain? Most people,
No pain.
Bob, you cheated. You've been hanging around me for too many years, right? Most people will say what? What would most people say, Bob?
Pleasure.
Pleasure, right? Most people will say pleasure. What's the opposite of pain? In a room, in a crowded room with 100 people, everyone will yell out pleasure. Opposite of pain is pleasure, but that's not true. Pain and pleasure are not opposites. Pain is the price that you pay for pleasure. The greater the pleasure, the greater the price you pay in pain. Okay, so the problem is that when you think pain and pleasure are opposites, well, everybody wants pleasure. So what do? If we want pleasure, and that's normal, that's how we're hardwired. If you want pleasure, and if pain is the opposite of pleasure, then pain is something that must be avoided at all costs. But if you spend your entire life running away from pain and avoiding pain at all costs, then there's one thing for sure, that the best you're ever going to be is mediocre. You're never going to be great, because greatness only comes when you embrace the pain and you are willing to put in the pain of hard work, commitment, and sacrifice to achieve the greatness and the levels that you're looking for. Real pleasure, where does real pleasure exist and live and dwell? Outside of the comfort zone. Counterfeit pleasure, right there, smack dab in the middle of the comfort zone. Real pleasure leads to fulfillment, the realization of one's potential, and that can only come with hard work. Counterfeit pleasure requires no work whatsoever. Okay, real pleasure, a relationship with another human being, right? That's an incredible pleasure, but it's hard, especially a relationship with a spouse. It's hard work, selflessness, giving, constant investment, constant work. That's real pleasure. The opposite, the counterfeit pleasure, an escort service. You don't have to be nice to the escort. You don't have to invest in deep, meaningful conversations with the escort. Okay, it's the opposite. That's the counterfeit pleasure. So we have to ask ourselves. The Ramchal is telling us, what do we want in life? What do we want from life? What is our goal? Real pleasure, Kirvas Elokim, closeness to Hashem. If that's our real goal, well, get ready, because you're going to have to work hard. It's going to require sacrifice. You're going to have to leave the comfort zone. If all you want is counterfeit pleasure, then it's all over the place. Go enjoy. It's everywhere. Okay. I'll give you one more example, and then we'll move on. Real pleasure. In the category of real pleasure, a real pleasure in life is being good. Being a good person. That's a real pleasure. But it's not easy. You have to learn, you have to train yourself how to be a giver and not a taker. You have to be willing to help others and give of your time and give of your energy and give of your resources. You have to work on your midot, on your qualities and your attributes. What's the counterfeit pleasure? The opposite, the counterfeit version of being a good person. Looking good. Looking like a good person, winning approval from other people, winning other people's acceptance. Okay, real pleasure. A person who's into real pleasure, he's far less concerned with what other people think about him or her than he is concerned with what the right thing to do is. The counterfeit pleasure, the easy version of that, without having to do the hard work and the sacrifice and the selfless giving of oneself, is to look good, is to, you're more concerned what people think about you and how you look and how you appear and your image and your reputation than you are with actually doing the hard work to be good. So what the Ramchal is warning us about over here is that he's basically saying, and I told you once early on in our discussions that Rabbi Noach Weinberg told us that everything he said and everything he knew and everything he taught and all of his wisdom came from this book. So I'm sure that idea, counterfeit pleasure, real pleasure, I'm sure it comes from this line that we just read in the Ramchal. And that is, what's the Ramchal telling us? He's warning us, beware of counterfeit pleasures. They distract us from the real pleasures. They lure us with feelings that are temporarily enjoyable, but they steal our long-term happiness. I was trying to think of a parable or an analogy to try to bring this to life, and just like a simple one that came to mind is that you have a person who his whole life he worked very, very hard in his career, and he always made sure to invest money into his retirement fund, his 401k, and he was, he didn't make a lot of money, but he always found a way to put a little bit aside every month. And it was hard, it was sacrifice, but he was willing to do it because he knew that one day, eventually, he'd be able to retire. And he works and works and works for years and years and years. And finally, his financial planner tells him, okay, time, you've made enough, you've saved enough, you can retire now. You can finally retire. And he's so excited, and he's so happy. And he goes to the bank to withdraw some of the money from his, safety deposit box where he's been putting aside all of his money. And what happens? They tell him at the bank, we have bad news, sit down, we have to tell something, we have to share some news with you. All that money that you've been saving for the last 40, 50 years, well, it was all counterfeit. All the cash that you put in the safety deposit, it was counterfeit cash. It's worth nothing. There's nothing there. You have nothing at all. Okay? That's the analogy, because if a person spends their whole life pursuing counterfeit pleasures, then when they get to the world to come, they get to Olam Haba, and they say, okay, it's time to retire. It's eternity. I'm here for eternity. Let's go. Let's cash in on some of our deposits. They're gonna find out, the person's gonna find out that it was all counterfeit pleasures that they pursued. They never pursued the real pleasures in life, the ones that they'll be able to use to finance their eternal existence in the world to come. Okay. Any questions on that before we move on to the next line?
David, I have a question. What about the person, excuse me, who has no religious feeling, no connection to Hashem, but is really an outstanding human being? All his life is filled with good. He makes good decisions. He's a giver. He's charitable. He takes care of people. How does Hashem see him?
First of all, who defines good? Okay. First of all, who defines good? You call that guy a good person. What does that mean? What is he doing that's good? I mean, okay, yeah, there are certain things that are definitely objectively good, giving, being selfless, being kind, right? But if you don't have an objective definition of that transcends the human definition of good, then one person might say he's good because he does this, and the person might say he's good because he does this, right? One person might say he's good because he supports this organization and this, movement. But why does that necessarily make him good? Maybe that movement is problematic. Maybe there are issues with that movement. That's A. B is, if he really is doing good things that are defined by the Torah as being good, then he's getting a reward for those things. Even if he doesn't do them for religious reasons, even if he doesn't do them because they're commandments or mitzvahs, he just does them because he feels that they're the right thing to do. He'll get reward for that. Hashem will reward him for that. And he'll get, a share in the world to come for that. It just won't be as the same as it would if he understood what he was doing, and if he understood that he was fulfilling the will of Hashem, and if he understood that he was doing mitzvahs in the process of whatever it is that he's doing. So that's why it's helpful to know and be aware of the fact that, what you're doing is the will of Hashem. What you're doing is a mitzvah. So it's a higher level. The Talmud says that it's the one who's commanded to do a mitzvah and does it is on a higher level than the one who does something and they're not commanded to do it at all. Okay? Because when I do it, when I'm commanded to do it, I'm doing it because it's the right thing to do, whether I want to do it or not. If I'm not commanded to do it and I'm doing it, then obviously I'm doing it because it fills some emotional need on my part. So it doesn't mean it's not a great thing. It's still a great thing, but it's just not on the same level.
Thanks.
Okay. Now the Ramchal is going to deal with the fundamental question of, if the reason why Hashem created us is to be connected to Him, then why did He not create us automatically connected to Him? Why did He pre-connect us? Why did He not pre-connect us, so to speak? And we know what the answer to that is, but let's see how He talks about it over here. However, in order for man to merit this true good, closeness to Hashem, becoming attached to Hashem, the source of true perfection, it is fitting that he should first toil and endeavor through his own efforts to acquire it. This means that he should endeavor to attach himself to Hashem, blessed be he, through the power of actions that bring about this result, making a person close to him. And what are those actions? Haim ha-mitzvos. These are the mitzvos. These are the mitzvahs in the Torah. When we talk about the mitzvahs in the Torah, the mitzvahs in the Torah are not just some random list of do's and don'ts, not just some list that God said, here's what you've got to do and why. Well, just because I said so, because that's what that tradition, that's what our Babis and Zaydis did in Europe. No, the list of mitzvahs, positive and negative commandments, are there because they actually help us to create and forge and develop that spiritual connection, that closeness to Hashem through our actions. Okay, and it has to be the result of our actions. The closeness has to come as a result of our hard work. Otherwise, it's incomplete. We don't own it. It's not us. We're not the masters of it. Okay. Question. This is a question. I know this question bothers everybody. Bothers me, and I know it bothers everybody. And I've spoken to a lot of people about this, and a lot of people have brought this up with me over the years. Okay. The question is, if it's true, as the Ramchal seems to be telling us right now that it is true, that doing mitzvahs, fulfilling the positive commandments, avoiding the prohibitions, right? That is what creates connection to God. That's what creates attachment, devekus, to Hashem. And that's the ultimate purpose. Okay. Then how is it possible that there are so many Orthodox people out there? And we can let's assume that these Orthodox people are keeping the mitzvahs, right? They're keeping Shabbos, they're keeping kosher, they're keeping family purity laws, they're doing all the mitzvahs. How is it possible that we all have read about, heard about, met Orthodox people who are doing all the mitzvahs and yet seem to be very far away from this attachment to Hashem, from this holiness, from this devekus, from this connection, either because of the crimes that we find out they are convicted of, or because of the behavior that they show towards us, or because of the, what goes on in their careers and in their business lives that we find out about, or the scandals and all these things that we hear about, the commercial crimes, right? The sexual crimes, all these things that are constantly, the news loves to cover. There's nothing more interesting. Let's be honest. There's no better news story than an Orthodox Jew who's done some horrible thing, right? That sells papers. Okay, so we know these stories. We've heard these stories a million times. So how is it possible, if the Ramchal just told us that doing mitzvahs brings you closer to Hashem, makes you holy and connected, that there are so many that we all know about these Orthodox people that are doing the mitzvahs, but they don't seem to be connected to Hashem in the way the Ramchal is described?
I got an answer.
Okay, before you answer, just raise your hand if you've ever been bothered by that question in one form or another. Yes. Okay, Jeff, let's hear.
First of all, I think people can also do mitzvot selectively. They can pick the ones that serve their needs. So you can do external mitzvot. You can, dress a certain way. You can talk a certain way. You can observe certain things. But in your business life, where nobody's watching, you can do whatever. Number one. Number two, you're supposed to love Hashem with all your heart, soul, might, and brain, and people kind of leave some things out. They don't give everything. And some people can still be idolatrous, even though they may give the impression that they're not. I mean, if money is what you're most concerned about, it's most precious to you, it's what you devote most of your time and energy and most of your love for, then you're an idolater no matter what you do.
Right. That's very much along the lines with what I wanted to say over here. Basically, I think what Jeff's saying is that, one way of looking at this is that there are 3 levels of a mitzvah. Okay. And to really simplify it, there's a body of the mitzvah and there's the soul of the mitzvah. Okay. The body of the mitzvah is the physical action that one does while performing the mitzvah. So, if you want to talk about lighting Shabbos candles, it's moving your hand with the match over the flame and lighting the Shabbos candle. Or making kiddush, it's the physical act of holding the kiddush cup and saying certain words in Hebrew, okay? And drinking the wine. There's the action of the mitzvah. Let's call that the body of the mitzvah. In Hebrew, the goof of the mitzvah, okay? Then there's a deeper level of a performance of a mitzvah, and that is involving your emotions in the mitzvah. And what's for dinner? Joe's cooking. Then there's the emotional element of the mitzvah, which is getting your heart involved in the mitzvah, being into it, being connected to it. And then there's another level, the highest level, which is not only are you doing the action and not only are you emotionally connected to the action, but you also really understand the depth of the mitzvah and the philosophical meaning behind it and the symbolism and what it means and what it represents. And you thought about it and you're thinking about it while you're doing it. And it's changing you and it's affecting you and it's developing you. Okay, there's just many levels of doing the mitzvah. The action, the doing of the mitzvah itself, the body of the mitzvah, that's just the beginning. What really we're striving towards is the soul of the mitzvah. Now, to be called orthodox, to merit that magnificent title, which, by the way, I personally feel has done more to separate and disconnect and drive wedges between Jews than anything else. These titles, these terms, Reform, Conservative, Orthodox, they're just utterly meaningless to me. They do nothing. They don't describe at all. If you tell me a Jew, he's an Orthodox Jew, it doesn't tell me anything about him and his relationship to Hashem. And if you tell me that someone's a Reform Jew, that doesn't tell me anything at all about them and their relationship to Hashem. They're just silly, random words that historically have been attached to different groups of people, but they're not only they're useless, but they're destructive, right? Because we all know many Orthodox people that are not experiencing Devekus, or don't seem to be, and we know many Reform, quote unquote, people that are certainly very connected to Hashem and very spiritually elevated. So those terms are meaningless. But to earn the moniker of Orthodox, all you have to do is the actions of the mitzvahs, right? I wear the yarmulke, I wear the tzitzis, I keep kosher, I go to shul, I pray 3 times a day, I keep Shabbos, I keep kosher, I keep family purity laws, I do all the positive mitzvahs, I avoid all the prohibitions, I'm Orthodox. All you have to do is the action, but it's not the action of the mitzvah that creates the devekus, that creates the connection and the attachment to Hashem. It's the soul of the mitzvah that creates the devekus. So just doing the mitzvah in action, on the level of action, is not enough to create devekus. So therefore, you can have people that are doing all of the mitzvahs, are therefore considered by the rest of the world to be Orthodox, but they're not experiencing devekus because they're not into it. It's not affecting them. It's not penetrating them on the emotional level and on the intellectual level. So that's an important thing to keep in mind over here also. Okay.
I have a question, David.
Yeah.
What about the Yetzer Hara in a case like that? Because I know you have told us that the higher the level the person, the stronger the Yetzer Hara is. So I'm just wondering if these Orthodox people, that the Yetzer Hara is strong in them and they are not fighting it well. And so they appear to be from, and they do things that really aren't. And I'm just wondering, is that
No,
like,
I think that's a very correct way of explaining it also. I mean, I don't think like what I'm saying, what you're saying, and what Jeff said, they're just different ways of kind of describing the same reality. But that's definitely true. As you grow spiritually, as you grow, in your connection to Hashem, don't think that your Yetzer Hara, your negative impulse, your negative inclination, the drive to bring you away from meaning and purpose and spirituality and connection is going to get less. On the contrary, it's going to get stronger and more powerful. Why? Because if it doesn't grow with you, as you grow, it doesn't grow, then eventually that balance of free will gets out of whack and there's no longer any free will there. So yeah, as you grow and as you're more invested in your commitment to Torah and mitzvos, the Yetzer Hara is going to grow too. So yeah, I think that's also true that, that sometimes, I mean, you see these people that for years and years and years seem to have been tzaddikim, right? Not just good Jews, but the best, the Rabbi, the great spiritual giant of a leader who writes and teaches and leads, and all of a sudden you hear some stories that just make you shudder. There's a particular case going on like that now in Israel that's just to the greatest extreme that you could ever imagine in both ways. This particular individual for decades was looked at as one of the leading giants of Torah, Kabbalah, spirituality. He had hundreds, thousands of students who wrote books. Top guy who's now in prison for horrible crimes. And it keeps getting worse every day. More and more things are coming out that he did. So so I guess part of the way to understand that is that the Yetzer Hara is has to be so powerful in those people in order for their free will to maintain that if they give into it at one point, it can just totally consume them and take them over.
David?
Yeah, wait, hang on, Jeffrey. Before I said Seymour's very patiently and politely had his virtual hand up for a while, so I want to make sure to give Seymour a chance, and then we'll.
Sure.
Thanks, David. There's two things that I got in your last statements. First off, the person you're alluding to and others through my lifetime, frankly, I think that's a cop-out. There are just people who have bad inclinations and they're acting on it. I think it's simplistic to say it's Yetzer Hara. But the point that got to me during your explanation of orthodoxy and the rest of the conservative and reform movements, isn't there an implicit theme there that there should be a better relationship between the Orthodox, conservative, and reform movements in Judaism, and not have this standoffish and pointing at each other and so on? That's really I think the real message to the real conclusion to what you just said.
That would be wonderful. That would certainly be wonderful. I'm all for that. And there are a lot of people who agree with that, and there are a lot of people that are working very hard to make that a reality. The problem is that the mentality and mindset of a lot of people is, I'm in this group, and my group is right, and your group is wrong, and that's just how people tend to congregate in such a way, and it's very unfortunate, very, very unfortunate. It's actually what I of everything about L'chaim Center that I'm most proud of, or that gives me the most nachas, is just the reality, not lip service, not anything. It's just the reality that it doesn't matter at all when you walk into that place, whether you're conservative, reform, reconstructionist, or Orthodox, anything. It doesn't matter at all. You're a Jew, you're part of the family, and we're together. We're going to grow together, we're going to celebrate together. But sadly, that is not sadly, that's not the mainstream model. The mainstream model.
Rabbi, this is Hannah. I just want to say, when people say to me, what are you, Orthodox? I always say, I'm a Jew. I don't know what I am. I'm a Jew. And the other thing is, when people say, what does Judaism mean to you? I always say community. I also believe that we all have a spark in us. Because when I think about myself and how I have grown, well, you've known me for 20 years. I have grown, and I've never identified myself with anything, I identify myself with Jewish, and that's just it. And people are, what do you mean? But you go to shul every Shabbat. I said, so I go to shul, you can too, or whatever. But to me, the number one, and you say that, and my rabbi, I'm in Arizona, my Rabbi Alu says that he always says he does not like this term, Orthodox, conservative, because it doesn't mean anything.
Right.
We're all Jewish, period.
That's it.
By the way, you look very good. You look very relaxed. I think we should all go to Israel.
Bedtime here. No, not quite. Okay, we can wrap it up with that. I have a couple more things, but we can. I'll stop here. If anyone else has anything they want to share, discuss. Oh, Jeffrey, you had something.
Yeah. If the reason that the Yetzer Hara has to grow as we spiritually go up the ladder, then all it's doing is providing free will so we have a viable choice. So it really doesn't matter whether I'm on rung 3 and my Yetzer Hara is low, but it provides free will, or if I'm at 39, it's if it's a perfect system, if this is inherent in us and Hashem devised this to give us free will, I don't think it really matters. If you're at 39 and you screw up big, then maybe you're even worse off than if you're at 3 and you don't do a heck of a lot of positive things, but you stay away from these horrendous things that this person is trying to do.
That's true. That is true. And that's why when big people fall, they fall very, very far. They fall to the lowest of low. There's a great, I've shared this in the past, but a great discussion in the Talmud and Tractate Sukkah, somewhere in the 50s, 54, 55, somewhere over there. It says that when Mashiach comes, in the end, in the final days, when Mashiach comes, that Hashem is going to shech, he's going to slaughter the Yetzer Hara. Okay? So Mashiach comes, the Yetzer Hara is going to get shechted, and it said that it says that in the Talmud says that the tzaddikim are going to laugh, and the wicked are going to laugh. No, sorry. The tzaddikim are going to cry and the wicked are going to cry. And it says, why? So the wicked people are going to cry because they're going to look at the Yetzer Hara and it's going to be presented to them in the image of a hair, single hair. And they're going to look at that and they're going to say, oh my God, that was all the Yetzer Hara was. There was one single little hair and we couldn't conquer it. And they're going to cry from sadness and grief that they were not able to conquer one single hair. And then it says that tzaddikim are going to cry also. They're going to cry from joy. Why? Because the Yetzer Hara to them is going to be presented in the form of a giant mountain. And they're going to look at this giant mountain and they're going to say, oh my God, that was the Yetzer Hara, was even bigger than I thought. And I was able to conquer it. And they're going to cry with joy. And Moshe Feinstein asks the famous question, which is it? Is it a hair or is it a mountain? And the answer, of course, is that great famous Jewish answer.
Both.
It depends, right? It depends. If you were a tzaddik, then the Yetzer Hara was a mountain. Why? Because as you were growing spiritually, it was growing. You're growing, it's growing. You're growing, it's growing. So it is a mountain. But if you were not a tzaddik, if you were, let's say, a Russia, then you gave up growing a long time ago. Then the Yetzer Hara itself never had to grow either, because it didn't have to expand in order to provide you with constant free will. So it never grew either. It was a little hair. So the reality is, it doesn't matter where you are. Wherever you are, the Yetzer Hara is going to give you pressure. It's going to give you tension, right? When you're working out in a gym, you know that you got to, how much weight should you lift? Just enough, just a tiny bit more, that it's going to make it a little bit hard. You know, if I need to be lifting 50-pound dumbbells and I'm really lifting 40 pounds, no growth is going to happen. But if I lift the 60-pound dumbbells, I'm going to pull my muscles. You know, so you have to lift 51. So that's how it works in Judaism. You got to be fighting right there alongside of the Yetzer Hara. Wherever the Yetzer Hara is, that's where you got to be fighting. So, and it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter where you are, high or low. The Yetzer Hara is going to be right there, giving you the appropriate tension that you need to be able to fight against it. And then it's just knowing that and being prepared to fight the fight and not being afraid. Not being afraid. That's the main thing.
Doesn't Hashem have distinct warnings throughout the Torah about people who become hardy, or people? What is the saying that if you carry my name, you're under a higher obligation to?
Yeah, for sure. For sure. If you're walking around the world identifying outwardly as somebody who's committed their life to Torah and Judaism, then you're an ambassador. You're a representative. You're an ambassador. Everyone's going to look at you. People will see you if you're wearing a yarmulke on the street. Some people will see you, especially if you're in, some, maybe not on the North Shore of Chicago, but if you're in some unusual place, people will look at you. You might be the only outwardly Jewishly identified person that they're ever going to see in their lives. And they're going to watch you and study you and see what you do and see how you are in line at the supermarket and see if you weave in front of somebody on the highway and see how you speak to the person in the bank. They're going to be watching you. So yeah, the more outwardly, openly identified you are as Jewish, the more responsibility you have to be an ambassador and sanctify God's name in the Torah everywhere you go. All right, I'm going to go see what Yosef made for dinner tonight. It's always a...
Have a nice night. Enjoy your dinner.
All right.
Thank
everybody.
you, Rabbi.
Yeah, enjoy.
Great talk. Shalom.
Can't wait to see everybody very soon.